Welcome to the Heart of the Volunteer. I'm Paul Cummings. Before we get into today's episode, I want you to think about something for a second. Think about the last time the tones went off. Not the call itself, but think about everything around it. Who showed up? How many people were on the truck? How many times did the pager go off before someone answered? Because if you've been doing this long enough, you've felt it, the shift. Something's different. And it's not just in one town. It's not just one department in one state. It's everywhere. We've got more calls than we've ever had before, more responsibility than we've ever had before, and at the same time, fewer people carrying it. And the thing is, from the outside, like we've talked about before, none of that is obvious. The public still sees the truck. They still hear the siren. They still believe that when something goes wrong, someone's coming. Perhaps they take it for granted, but they're right. We always find a way to get it done. It's what we do. But behind that, there's a reality that not enough people are talking about. The same few people are showing up again and again, and they're not getting any younger. They're still balancing work. They're still balancing family. They're still balancing life. Still finding a way to answer the call. And at some point, you've got to ask the question, how long can this last? It's not from a place of doubt, but a place of responsibility. Because this isn't about whether the volunteer fire service matters. We all know it does. That's a given. This is about whether we're willing to be honest, though, about where it stands right now. Whether we're willing to look at it and say, I respect tradition, but something has to change. We can't keep running this service the same way we ran it in the late 1800s. Not saying everything has to change, but something has to change. Because if we don't have these conversations, if we just keep doing things the way we've always been doing them, just because it's the way they've always been done, then eventually the decision's going to get made for us. And in some places around the country, even locally here, that decision is being made. That's not what this is supposed to be. This has always been about people. People choosing to step up. People choosing to be there when it matters most. People choosing to give something back to the communities they're part of. That hasn't gone anywhere. But the world around it has. It's changed. And if we want this to last, if we want the next generation to have the same opportunity we had, then we've got to be willing to face that reality head on and give it everything we've got. And that's what this conversation is about. Today, I'm joined by Dave Denniston, somebody who's lived for nearly 4 decades in the fire service and now sees it from a perspective that most of us don't. He's been on the truck, he's led departments, held almost every position you can hold, and now he's looking at the fire service from a risk management level across the state. So when he talks about where things are heading, it's not a guess, it's what he's seeing. And some of it, it's hard to hear, but it's real and it's necessary. So here's my conversation with the Vice President of the Association of Fire Districts in New York State, Mr. Dave Denniston. Thank you for joining us here on the Heart of the Volunteer podcast. I'm Paul Cummings, today joined by a very special guest, guy I've been following for quite a while. Actually conversed with a couple months ago as we were both working kind of on the same project. But anyway, I'm welcomed here by Dave Denniston of Cortland, New York. Currently the Director of Risk Management, McNeil and Company, and also the first VP of the Association of Fire Districts in the state of New York. Dave, I appreciate you taking the time today. Before we get into everything, I want to really go back to 1989 when you first got into the fire department in Cortlandville. Walk me through that moment. Did you think it was going to be a lifelong thing for you, or was it just something to try at the time?
No, I thought it was going to be a lifelong thing. My family had been in the fire service. My grandfather was a fire chief. My dad was a fire chief. So I guess I always kind of thought it was inevitable that I would follow in their footsteps. Happened, I got home from college and we had a fire at the neighbor's house. And I watched the fire truck roll up, and I watched a crew of probably average age of 65 get off the truck and throw a ladder and pull hoses. And I go, these guys need some help sooner rather than later. And that's what started the process.
Who knew we'd be right back there today, huh? This many
Yep.
years later. So you've gone from seeing the fire service at a completely different level now. So you've served as firefighter. If I read correctly, you served as chief, a commissioner, county coordinator, and of course now you're in risk management. So at what point did your perspective on the fire service really start to change over the last 35, 40 years?
I, I guess it's changed from the beginning. Once I got into the fire department, became a firefighter, I remember taking my first essentials class and sitting there, and I don't want to say the instructor did a bad job, but I sat there thinking I could do better. And that just kind of opened the door. And then, as I watched some of my officers, I'm going, I could do that, and maybe I could do better. So I think everything I've looked at, it's always been an opportunity, not necessarily to prove myself, but to say, hey, I could do that, or I've got something to add. And I think that's what's, kept me going throughout the years.
Yeah, and not just for yourself, but for the organization as well, I'm assuming, because that's where I
Yes.
sat
Yep.
all these
Yep.
years, trying to figure out where I could not just better myself, because I think we all try to do that, but where I could
Yep.
be a best fit to the organization, right?
Yes.
So was there a moment, we're getting into the volunteer crisis. Obviously, the whole podcast is the heart of the volunteer. I'm really trying to dig in and find out what the heart of the volunteer means to people. So was there a moment, I would say, because I've been doing this for 25 years and I've noticed a change. Was there a moment that you realized the system itself had issues, that the structure of the volunteer service started, you could see fractures about? When did you start to see that?
We've talked about recruitment and retention forever, and getting new people involved and all of those kind of things. And I think, most recently, probably what EMS went through when we started looking at, the struggles that EMS had and getting rigs out, getting them people's, houses on time. When you sit there and you start hearing second and third activations, and the wheel starts spinning in your head going, man, if I was having a heart attack, I do not want to hear a second activation for somebody trying to get a crew together.
Amen.
So, we've watched that closely after the last few years. And, most recently it's kind of hit me that fire is now going through the same thing EMS had gone through, but, EMS just happened to kind of come to the forefront a little earlier. But as we sit there looking at fire now, and we look at multiple activations, and we look at folks not being able to get a truck on the road, or the average age of the crew once they do get there, it's like we started looking at things going, we got to make some changes, and we got to do it quickly. So
Yeah, the anxiety that I get when I'm at work, right? Because I work full time, just like the rest of us. And the anxiety I get when I look at bricks to make sure that we're going to get a crew from the hours of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. I mean, especially as an officer now, you're running into that. Do I leave work? Should I leave work? And then it's about the crew. First you're thinking about the victims, and then it's, my dad's been doing this for 40 years. He joined in 1989. Is he okay? Are they going to get the resources they need? Because you're right. What used to take us one fire department 25 years ago with one crew, we'd have 10 to 15 people. We're now doing with 3 to 4 fire departments and doing with 6 people instead of 12, right?
yeah, we're in a car fires going 3 departments deep, and it's just like, that's crazy.
It's crazy.
I think of our neighbors, and we've always had fire departments that, some are stronger than the others, some have more, volunteers than others, and all of those kind of things. But there had always been those, what I call the steadfast departments, that pretty much, unless the town was burning down, they did their own thing. You might get called to stand by in your quarters or something like that. Now on an automatic alarm, we're banging 2 and 3 departments out to go together in some cases. And you got to look at that and say, this isn't right. We've got to do some things differently.
Well, let's look at it, from a risk standpoint, because obviously you spend a lot of your life doing that. From where you sit now and all your experience, looking across all these fire departments across the state of New York, what's the biggest risk to the volunteer service right now that most people aren't talking about?
Again, when we start looking at these 2 and 3 department activations, I sit there looking at the number of dollars of iron we put on the road, so all of a sudden I got 3 departments going with multi-million trucks per department. And you start looking at that going, every vehicle more we put on the road is that much more exposure.
Right.
So, we sit there and we look at that aspect of it. And, I'm not saying that they're not necessary, but we had a structure fire earlier this year. And I remember getting on the scene and looking down the road, and there was like 8 different departments, fire trucks on the road. But then I'm sitting there looking at the manpower pool on the front yard going, we got more trucks than we got people here,
Right.
and the people that were there were driving the trucks. So when we used to send a mutual aid engine to somebody, it had a crew of 4, 5, 6 people on it that you knew were going to come off ready to go to work. Now you sit there watching that truck come down the road and it's got a driver and maybe one firefighter on it. So, somebody said the other day we've become a glorified Uber service for firefighters. And I go, oh, there's a lot to that. There really is.
Right. Right. You would have squawked at that maybe 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
It makes a lot of sense now. What do you think it is? Obviously we know there's staffing issues, but because of I really want to dig into the staffing issues because I know that there are a million, if just in New York alone, there's got to be a million people that have this in their heart, but there's a roadblock that's stopping them from doing it. Is it in the lack of incentives? Is it the too many expectations? Is there something deeper than that, you think?
I think the other day, I was looking at the training required and all of those kind of things. I took 38 hours of firefighting essentials.
I did too, yeah.
Now we want 120 some hours just to get somebody to the front door, let alone, go in it with a hang line.
Yep.
So, but that's not a bad thing, and a lot of people blame the training. Well, if there wasn't so much training required and all of this kind of stuff required, there'd be more firefighters. That training is not a bad thing. I think we're better prepared today than we ever have before.
Yep.
When you look at what we're going to today, but back before they said, I read something yesterday, you used to have 24 minutes on average to get out of a working house fire. Now you got 3 to 4.
3 to 4.
So we have to do a better job training our folks and getting them prepared and doing all those kind of things. So I don't think we can blame the training, but what we do, we're losing some sense of community. And that's, even if you look at your own habits, stuff that you used to go to the store for, now you're picking up the phone and calling, or, going on a computer and ordering Amazon or Walmart or something like that. So the community isn't what it used to be. We used to do everything locally within that community, and now nobody thinks twice about jumping in the car and driving an hour to go somewhere else to do something. So, our schools have changed and closed, our hospitals have changed and closed. Everything in our community has changed, but we're still trying to run the fire department the same way we did in the late 1800s when this thing was developed. So,
right, absolutely. So I think it's safe to say. Are we fixing the problem, Dave, from where you're sit, or are we just managing the decline?
I think up until this point we have been somewhat managing the decline. I think it's very tough for us to admit that maybe there is a problem, or maybe we aren't providing the service level. But you look at the call volume has gone way up too. And I was talking to somebody the other day. I said, back when my dad was fire chief, we had a fire phone in the house, and the horn outside. And when that thing went off, you went outside and did a 360 looking for the column of smoke because something was burning.
Yeah.
Nowadays the pager goes off 4 or 5 times. You mentioned it earlier. You're sitting at work and you go, do I go to this? Do I not go to that? I sit here with my own employees, and we're all about the volunteer fire service and the fire service in general. And I want to send my folks, but I also got to look at it and go, are they really needed, or is this just another smells and bells that they're going to be gone for an hour? They're not going to be able to do anything to help anybody. It's a false call to begin with, so it makes it harder for our. Somebody said the other day, the employers don't respect the fire service like they used to. I said, no, the employer's got a business to run. Back an ambulance call now, you send one of your people out on an ambulance call, they may be gone 2 or 3 hours. By the time you get to the hospital, we've got long unload times, we're transporting further distances and all that kind of stuff. Who can afford to let their people go for 3 hours? I don't have enough extra staff to be able to do those kind of things. We got to keep the doors open and keep business in check here too. So it's,
right.
I don't think we've adjusted to the changes in call volumes and what's going on in our communities enough.
Do you think we've done a good job of communicating with those communities, Dave? I sit here, do we lead with the wrong things? Obviously fire is a part of our job, but like you just said, the call volume has gone up. And so you think we're leading with the wrong message perhaps?
I think we do, and I think again we're not being honest with ourselves. We're encouraging people right now, do a SWOT analysis of your organization. Figure out what your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats are, and you're going to find you are not doing things the way you need to do things at this point in time. Just because we don't want to admit. We got done with a commissioners meeting the other night. We walked out on the floor going, do we need all this iron? Are our priorities in the right place? And for a lot of us, they're not.
Right.
We still call ourselves fire departments. A lot of us are EMS agencies that have a fire truck that once in a while catch a fire. Right. But yet we still call it fire department, and we still, that's our main focus on training, and everything else is a fire stuff. But that's not the majority of what we're doing anymore.
Right. And that's what that I've changed my messaging, is the fact that, we've always pushed the danger and the mental aspects. And if I'm sitting at the outside, I'm 42 years old, I've got kids, I've got a career, man, I don't know if I want to go through all that. When in fact, the reality of it is, mentally, it can be a very good tool for an average person, right? The community that's involved, right? So what do you think that fire departments are doing wrong, and what do you think they're in generally speaking, Dave? I know there's a load of issues, but what's one thing that most fire departments should stop doing right now if you had to tell them?
Again, I don't know whether it's stop doing or start doing, but we got to do that SWOT analysis. We got to do a community vulnerability assessment
and admit our issues.
Back when I joined our fire department, my whole town was small dairy farms, family-owned dairy farms. Okay, we don't have any anymore. We've got a couple corporate farms that, farm most of the land in our community, but yet our fire department model hasn't changed. We used to rely on all those family members back, 20, 30 years ago. Majority of my fire department was the farmers. Absolutely. And the farm hands and all of those family members that came down there. Well, they don't exist anymore. Now they're working in town and other jobs and all of those kind of things. So, I don't know that we need to stop doing anything. I think what we do need to do is take an honest evaluation, look at our communities, look at ourselves, look what we're geared up to do, and then start asking the tough questions. Start talking to your neighbors. And I'm not talking, once you start saying things like that, people go, oh, you're talking about closing firehouses or taking somebody over. No, I'm not talking about that at all. What we're talking about is, again, figuring out where your neighbors are strong and you may not be, or you're strong and your neighbors may not be. Do we all need to be everything for our community? And we've all got those folks that join the fire department, then they burn themselves out because they go get every level of training that they can, from swift water to high angle to hazmat and everything else.
Absolutely.
And then we can't get enough people there to do that anyway. So why not talk to your neighbors, and one organization concentrate? We're going to be the best first attack engine company in the county, and the next is going to be the best water shuttle company in the county, and the next is going to be the ladder company of the county, and the next is going to be the rescue company of the county. Doesn't mean that we all can't do all of those things, but find one thing, get really good at it, train yourself on it, equip yourself on it, and then rely on your neighbors, because we're all going to the same calls anyway.
Well, and you just said it. We got to start relying on communication amongst agencies, not just with the public, but getting honest with our problems and being able to admit that. I think 100%. It's what we did at home for my department. And it's what I encourage everybody to do. It's a pride thing that gets in the way, obviously, with a lot of people.
It is a pride thing, but I've seen different areas of the state and different areas of the country. That's the nice thing about my jobs. I get to travel all over the country and see the same things, and see how some people have adjusted and made changes and others haven't.
Yeah.
But when I look at the places that are really successful, it's where they get really good at one thing.
Yeah.
And boy, they pride themselves on that, and they become, like I said, the best darn attack engine in the county, and build upon that.
Absolutely.
But even when you look at our apparatus, it's funny because, we get a truck, and then what happens? Our neighbors, they got to get a new truck, and maybe just a little bit bigger, or few more bells and whistles and those kind of things. We don't need, 3 ladder trucks and 3 departments.
Absolutely.
Maybe
Especially
we need one ladder
departments.
truck, but then let's, supplement the other things that we really do need. And that's what we're not good at.
Yep, I agree with you. You brought up training, and I think this is the one thing that we do get wrong. I was, like you, I took essentials, quick, easy, painless. And actually in Genesee County, it was a very good program. I felt very good about it. I felt good about my skills when I got out. You go through the years, I think upwards of equivalents of 200 hours worth of training. to become interior certified. But one thing that people don't often realize is you don't necessarily have to go out and brunch yourself with 200 hours. I've loved the BFO and the IFO program. I've been encouraging our own fire department, get in, try it out for a few months. We'll get you trained enough to go put cones, do traffic control, and let's just see if you like it before you invest that time. And almost every time, Dave, you get somebody in, get their feet wet for 6 months, and they're begging you, when's the next class? When's the next class? Because all of a sudden time doesn't become that big mystical thing anymore, because they love to do it and they want to do it and they want to spend the time. They just haven't realized that yet till they got in the door. So I guess circle back around. Do you think that in most fire departments, you correct me if I'm wrong, you obviously see more of the ground level around the state than I do. Are you think we're too afraid to hold a lot of volunteers accountable in a lot of cases because we're worried about losing them? Maybe we're going a little bit easier and we're trying maybe going too easy in some cases.
I think we do. We really got to look at the retention piece of it, and you got to start, as members move, and some people, it wasn't for them. It wasn't what they thought it was going to be. They, something changed in their life and they now don't have time. They had to go get the second or third job, some of those kind of things. But if we're not doing exit interviews and really seriously asking our folks, why are you leaving? You may find out it's a variety of different things. Maybe it's the way you do training. Maybe it's that your department only does training, every third Tuesday night, and their kids have soccer games on Tuesday nights and they just can't be there. Maybe it's a leadership thing. Maybe they don't like the culture of the department, So I think we've got to do a better job on those exit interviews, figuring out why people are leaving. And then is there something that we can learn for that and adjust for that and go, hey, I never thought about that. We could have training Saturday morning or Sunday instead of Tuesday nights. And maybe that's not only would have kept those people that left, but it may make it easier for the folks that you still got.
Absolutely.
But we're so afraid, it's easy for us when somebody leaves to go, they were never going to cut it anyway. And they didn't have the heart or they didn't have the guts or something else.
Finding excuse.
Instead of saying, maybe we got some things we got to change in our organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I find the excuses a lot, and it's funny because I go to that time one all the time. That's the one I circle back to. And it's not like even 25 years ago, we can go back farther, but 25 years ago, people were busy too. The different, this right here, the phone. Back in the day, we didn't have them, so it didn't consume as much time. We felt like we had more time. We had to go to the firehouse to catch up with people. But I always circle back to time because I work full time. I run the youth baseball program. I coach baseball, coach football. I still have time to be down there for all the training and make about 100 calls a year, which is about a quarter of our calls. So I struggle with the time because you'll always find time for things you want to do. I think would that be a fair statement? But is that the number one reason you find when
you enjoy it and you feel like you're part of something and you're doing good when you get down there? But once it gets to be the point where you start to question whether you're of value, whether you're appreciated, yes, whether you're doing the right things, I can make all excuses in the world. I can find a million other things I got to do. But you know what? If I feel like my time is being valued, I feel like my training officers put their heart and soul in and develop a good training, I'm going to be there. I'm going to make it work and I'm going to be there.
Yep.
But if I go down there and, some captain walks out and looks at the truck and goes, oh, hey, the K-12, we haven't done anything with that. Tonight we're going to do K-12 training. That's not training. That's right. Wasting everybody's time. And then I'm going to find excuses not to be there and to do something else.
Excellent. And same thing as finding, everybody's strengths and weaknesses. We talked about doing that between fire departments, doing that within your own organization. Some people are good with the tools. Some people are good on a line. Some people are good at traffic. Finding that, one of the greatest things for me about being an officer is looking back in the back and I turn around, seeing the 4 guys back there or gals and going, okay, this is what I've got today. And it's using those strengths and weaknesses against each other to accomplish the same mission, regardless of who's on the truck, and making them feel valued. Like you said, I think it's ultra important. What are firefighters not seeing about the risk that we're creating today by not jumping on this and trying to solve these crises internally, but maybe relying on bigger organizations to do it?
Yeah, I think, again, if we're not asking those tough questions, if we're not looking at our organizations, what's going to, and the volunteer fire service to me is the heart of what's right in America today. It really is.
Love
and
that.
I'm 100%, in favor of it. I've lived it. I eat, breathe, and sleep it. And I look at the people that do this and I go, this is amazing. But when you look at the model itself and you ask yourself, there's no other business that could run this way, where you don't know who's coming to work, you don't know when they're coming to work. It amazes me that when the pager goes off, somehow we manage to get enough of the right people there to do the job. There's no other business that you could run that
Yeah.
way. It wouldn't work, but yet somehow it works in the fire service. But as we're watching these second and third activations, as we're watching fewer and fewer members able to do that, we're putting a huge stress on it. And to the point where it's becoming dangerous, I think.
Well, and I think we're also putting a Band-Aid on a obviously much bigger problem. To the public's eye, we're getting the job done. Yes, like we said, it takes 3-4 fire companies, maybe half the crew, but the job at the end of the day is still getting done, right?
Right.
And I don't think even the public understands the risk behind this of the short staffing in the middle of the day. Like, what really happens when the tones go off? Dave, I interviewed a guy the other day in West Virginia. He's one of 3 members left in his fire department, and the closest mutual aid is 25 minutes away. So what? And they're having the same problems. I think he said the closest mutual aid has 6 members. So what do you do when those members work all the time? Your house literally burns down. That's the risk that we're creating. But like you said, no other business can work on this model. One thing that you said, though, that stands out, the American value. Since 1620, since the Pilgrims arrived, what have we been doing for each other in the time of need? And I think that's what I want to get out to people, that I don't look at it from an incentive point of view. I think some of us old school people don't. I don't do this for any incentive or any gain for myself. Where do you think that's gone? Do you think it's still out there in people? Do you think they watch the news and see these stories and still think for a split second, I want to help?
I think the messaging sometimes, there's a lot of folks out there now that go, hey, we're some of our messaging is that, your local fire department is going to close unless you volunteer. Do people really want to jump on a sinking ship? So we've got to look at that, and we got to make sure that we're talking about all the good things we do, all the things that we love, and all of that kind of stuff. But we also got to sit there and go, am I being fair to myself? Am I being fair to my family? My family has sacrificed a lot because of my involvement in the fire service, as is yours and everybody else's.
Yep.
We have missed family dinners, we have missed Christmases and Thanksgiving, we have missed concerts and all that kind of stuff. Is that really fair to our families? Because those of us that do it and still love to do it are killing ourselves in that process. So we've got to, you say, where's the risk in all this? The risk is that more of us are going to one day just go, I can't do it anymore. Or our family's going to say, you can't do this anymore. I need you. Family comes first, religion, all those kind of things. And you put the fire department first for so many years. We need you here as well. And that, that's going to come back and bite us at some point.
Absolutely. So you see a lot of this from the state level. That's safe to say, Dave. So, in a lot of areas around the country, mergers are starting to take place. County fire departments are starting to take root. Obviously, in New York here, we're not in a place where we can have county led fire departments. Is that a discussion, though, that's taking place on the state level as far as giving the counties some of the flexibility?
The major fire service organizations here in New York are looking at 2 things right now. First is nominal compensation. So is there some stipends for paid on call, paid per call, some of those kind of things? Again, it's not to make everybody career firefighters. It's not to get rid of the volunteer fire service at all. But if we could man an engine to handle that 80 to 90% of the calls that need no more than 1 engine to go reset an alarm, do all those kind of things. When you look at that model, you've also got to go, my fire department, we don't have enough volume to even do that. But if I worked with 3 or 4 of my neighbors, maybe not a county-wide thing, definitely not a statewide thing at all, but just 3 or 4 of my neighbors got together and pooled all of our call volumes. If we could man an engine in one of those 4 firehouses, even on a rotating basis, it would take care of those calls that only need that 1 engine response on. Yep. It would not burn the people out. So we're not asking them to come down, every time somebody smoke alarm trips. Or you mentioned cell phones earlier. To me, that's been the death of a lot of what we do, because now everybody picks up the phone. They see a little whiff of smoke. Oh my gosh, I better call this in. Or a car on the side of the road. oh my gosh, I better call this in. Before when somebody had to look up that 8-digit phone number, they didn't do that quite so much.
Right. It made
So
sure it was
if
legit.
there's a way that through, some kind of incentive stipends, those kind of things with some regionalization, again, not talking about closing firehouses, but working together to answer those needs,
Pulling resources.
I think that could really turn some things around for us. And again,
Absolutely.
a lot of people get scared because they go, "Oh, you're gonna force the volunteer fire service out." No, we're trying to save the volunteer fire
Yep.
service. And if we don't do anything, it's going away. We lost 8
Oh,
departments in New York State last year. There's
yeah.
a whole bunch more talking about
I,
closing their doors this year. Every time you go on Facebook or one of these news things, you see another department contemplating it because they don't have enough money, they don't have enough people, they don't have all of those kind of things. So,
I too
if there
locally,
was
too
if there
locally.
was a way
Here.
that we could do, and consolidation is a big lift. You got to figure out who's got what assets, how they're going to fit together, and all of those kind of things. But one of the things that we've been, talking to lawmakers about and advocating for is if we could do some regionalization where we could just work together. And they go, why can't you do that right now? Well, you run into a couple problems. Number one is like the work comp end of it. If somebody gets hurt, and I got 4 departments that have no real legal ability to be working together, who's going to pay the work comp? Where is this going to come from? All of those kind of things. So those are the minor changes in legislation that we're looking at, trying to make it easier for us to work together to be able to answer some of those questions.
Absolutely. You mentioned the phones. I was responding to a fire last year, and I was joking with the guys. It was mutual aid. We had about a 15-minute transit time, and I pulled out my phone just to look at bricks and stuff. And Facebook was up from right before the call came in, and there was a live video feed of the fire we were responding to. I thought that was the wildest thing in the world.
It is crazy.
Unreal. So
But back before, if someone got hurt or you had a line of duty death of some kind, it'd be a while before that got out. Now that's out before you get back to the firehouse.
yeah, like I said, in this case, it was out before we even got to the fire. I thought
I,
that was
I
incredible.
went to a fire the other day, and by the time I got back to work, everybody here at work seemed to know everything about the fire, the conditions, all of this kind of stuff. And I'm like, you guys weren't even there.
I know.
So
And then all that.
we're fighting some of that too. A lot of it's
Yeah,
misinformation, and that's a
absolutely.
problem for us as well.
I deal with that on our Facebook page all the time. People commenting in thinking they've heard the right story, and then next a minor car accident turns into a high-speed chase with drugs involved. No, we gotta
With
stop.
40 deaths.
Yeah, exactly. So Dave, we got a few minutes left. I got a couple more questions for you. The last question that pertains to the volunteer fire service as a whole. If nothing changes, okay, if fire departments can't come to the table together, if we can't look in the mirror and admit that we have a problem, we can't find ways to engage the community, what does it look like for you in the next 5 to 10 years here in New York State and some of our more rural areas upstate?
I'm scared to death, and we're putting a lot of energy and a lot of effort into trying to get some of this legislation passed, trying to get some changes made. And people are like, why do you care so much? Why are you involved so much? And I could clock out at any time now. I've got almost 40 years into this thing. I've
Got
given
it.
to my community. I've done everything that I could do. I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for my kids and my grandkids because I love the experience that I had. I love the volunteer fire service. I love what it does for the local communities, and I want them to have the same opportunities. Whether that's volunteer or career or whatever that looks like. I don't want this to become, and as if we don't do anything, we're forcing the hand. We're going to get to full county departments. We're going to get to state-run organizations and those kind of things. And I don't think that's what any of us want.
Right.
So we've got to make some minor changes. We've got to make some tweaks. And I think that's why I care so much and why I'm putting into what I'm putting into it, because I want to make sure that people, for generations to come have the same opportunities that you and I had, because it's a wonderful thing. It really is.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely commend you, Dave. You have what we call the heart of the volunteer, right? It's we joke about this all the time. You get to life membership, and you're like, okay, it's time for me to clock, but people like you just don't, you can't, they care. And I really appreciate that, Dave. So maybe a more personal question now. Gone from 1989 to 2026. I'm assuming, right? You've held just about every position that you can hold. Does the pager, when it goes off, still give you the same feeling as it did all those years ago when it went off?
Unfortunately, I don't know that it does. It's funny. I used to before the alert ever went off, I would hear this. I'd be sleeping and hear the scanner down, and I'd hear the two pretones, and I'd be running out the door before the pager tripped.
Yep.
Now it's possible for me to wake up the next morning going, God, I think the pager went off last night and I didn't even do anything. So, it has changed some. But again, back before when we got toned out, we knew it was something that we needed all hands and, everybody needed to be there.
Right.
And we've allowed it to become a time now where we're doing so many things that they don't need us that, we're burning people out.
Desensitizing them almost to
Yeah.
a point. Absolutely. So everything you've seen, Dave, if say I'm a new guy, I'm walking into Cortlandville, brand new, in my 40s, have kids, have a career. I know I want to give back. I don't know exactly how. You got 2 minutes at the door because I got to be somewhere. What are you saying to me to convince me to come back and bring that application back filled out?
I think I'm going to tell you that it's changed my life, and I 100% believe in what we do and how we do, and I can't express. Not a lot of people will say thank you, but you feel good because you made a difference. And that's hard to get anywhere else. It really is. And to be able to have that opportunity, if you go to another job somewhere, most places it's going to take you years to get from entry point to where you want to be. In the fire service, if you put your heart and soul into it, you can write your own destiny. You can write your own path. I get to travel the country at this point, meet with firefighters and fire chiefs that, I only dreamt of before. And now I can pick up the phone and call them. I mean, those are the opportunities that are there. And I don't think it's hard to find those same opportunities anywhere else.
Absolutely.
I'd like to be a professional sports player, but I don't have the DNA and it's not in me. Fire-wise, I think everybody's got the DNA and it's in you. You get to write your own ticket, and you're going to get back out of it what you put into it. And there's nothing more rewarding.
And in that case, I'm not asking a follow-up because you just kind of touched upon it. What type of person does it take?
I think it takes somebody that's honest and ethical, somebody that really, truly, we ask people, why'd you join the fire service? Because I want to make a difference in my community. Do you really? Because if you do, the opportunities are endless.
Yeah.
But if you just want to go, I did something and I checked the box, it probably is not for you to begin with. So.
Yep. We've started going into the school. That's part of my initiative is to get into the school multiple times a year, starting at 8th grade, and trying to make the kids understand the time versus money reward, and realizing that in the time that you get out of the fire department, it starts with a question: what's more important to you now, time or money? And what do you think a 14, 15-year-old kid says? Money.
Money, absolutely.
Making them realize, though, in 10 years, it'll be time, but you still have to pay with that wallet. So we're going to have to find a way to give some time to save some of the wallet, or we're just going to go in all in on the wallet. I think the conversation, and I appreciate this interview so much, I think the conversation needs to be blunt at this point. This is what we're facing, and this is how it will affect you if we close the doors here. Plain and simple, no sugarcoating it, right?
Yeah.
So it's obviously, Dave, you believe in this. Do you think, and this is the last question I've got for you, maybe even the hardest, do you think we have a shot at changing and fixing this before it's too late? Or you think it's inevitable that we're just delaying the inevitable?
No, I absolutely think, and that's why we put so much time and effort into the things we're advocating for right now and those changes in legislation, because are they the solution? No. But I think they're necessary steps if we're going to save, and I think we can. I really believe we can.
Yep.
We need to start doing some things, and we need to do it quickly. This is not a 2-year from now, 3-year, 4-year from now problem. Yep. This is a problem right now.
Yeah, we're past it.
We've got to roll up our sleeves, and we got to start putting some things in place. And, again, doing that SWOT analysis, asking yourself what's out there, what do you got, where's it going? Same thing we've been doing for the fire service, on our initial, we pull up, what do we got, where's it going? That's what we got to do with the fire service right now. We got to do that complete 360, figure out where things are at, and we got to start putting some things in place to make it happen.
I agree. Well, Dave, thank you so much for spending about the last half hour. Man, I really appreciate it. I'd love to follow up with you maybe later this year.
Absolutely.
We'll take a snapshot now, and we'll take a snapshot in 6 months and see where we're at and see if anything.
No, I appreciate what you're doing and helping to get the word out there, because we got to start having some honest conversations, and that's exactly what this has been. So.
Yep. Well, thank you so much, Dave. We'll be in touch, and good luck with all the initiatives, and thank you so much for everything that you continue to do, because we all know that you don't have to do it. And I wish we had another 1,000 of you walking around New York State to help fix this problem. So thank you for all you do. Seriously.
All right, I appreciate what you do. Be safe out there.
It's easy to listen to a conversation like this and just move on. It's easier to go back to your routine. It's easier to go back to your department and not say a word. Just go back to doing things the way you've always done them. But if you really listened, if you really heard what was being said, this isn't something you can just brush off, because none of it felt that far away. It felt familiar. It felt like the things we talk about all the time in the Bay after a call. The things we joke about sometimes, because it's easier to do that than admitting it. But deep down, we all know it's real. We're asking more from a fewer people. We're relying on the same small group, and they still show up, because that's what they do. They always do. That's the part that makes this so hard to talk about, because the people carrying this, they don't complain. They don't ask for recognition. They just keep going till one day they can't. But that doesn't mean it's sustainable. At some point, we've got to stop measuring success by whether the job gets done. We've got to start asking, what is it taking to get it done? Because if it takes 3 departments to do what one used to, if it takes multiple activations just to get a crew together, if it takes the same handful of people sacrificing more and more of their lives to keep this moving, then we're not solving the problem, are we? We're just keeping it from breaking today. And that's the part we can't ignore anymore. Not if we actually care about this. Not if we want it to last for our kids and their kids. Because this has never been about the fire department. It's always been about the people. It always has been. And the truth is, those people are still out there. People who would step up. People who would give their time. People who would be there when it matters. But they're not just going to magically show up. We have to reach them. We have to be honest with them. We have to show them what this really is, not only what we think it should be. And maybe that starts with conversations like this. Maybe it starts with looking at your own department a little differently. Maybe it starts with having one uncomfortable conversation that you've been putting off. Because this doesn't change all at once. It changes one department at a time, one conversation at a time, one person at a time. And that's something every one of us has a role in. I really appreciate Dave for taking the time and being willing to have this conversation. And for saying the things that need to be said, honestly. Because this isn't easy, but it matters. And this is the heart of the volunteer.